I think that every NFL fan can admit that the best type of NFL game is a high-scoring back-and-forth affair. And while I, as much as the next guy, can appreciate a defensive masterclass from one or both teams where the defense absolutely dominates and carries a lackluster offense, to me, the most iconic and memorable games in the National Football League's history are the high-scoring games. Just remember Chiefs versus Bills in 2021, where everybody remembers Josh Allen converting all those 4th downs, throwing all those touchdowns to Gabe Davis, and he still ended up losing because Mahomes came through with 13 seconds left and answered with a field goal drive and ended up winning the game in overtime with that pass to Travis Kelce in the end zone. And it made me wonder, what are the biggest point totals we've ever seen combined by two teams? And I'll tell you right now, 72-41 is the highest scoring game we've ever seen in NFL history by the Redskins, the then Redskins, versus the New York Giants in 1966. But I'm actually not going to cover that game extensively because I have 3 other games on this list that are much more interesting, and they are in the modern era. All of them were 2004 or after, and this Redskins versus Giants game in 1966 is really foreign if you're under the age of like 65. I mean, most of these players are not recognizable, and it was a rout, absolute blowout game. But I'm going to be covering 3 NFL games that are pretty iconic and some underappreciated games that you might not know about that were over 100 points scored close to the very end, and classic NFL games in my opinion. But without further ado, before we get in this video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe, do all that good stuff, and let's get right on to the video. In 2004, the Browns played the Bengals in the highest scoring game in NFL history post AFL-NFL merger that occurred in 1970. And I think probably the craziest part of this game is that Kelly Holcomb was the backup in place of Jeff Garcia, and he went on to have an incredible, historic game. I mean, his team ended up putting up 48 points, and he threw for 413 yards, 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and had 1 fumble. Carson Palmer, on the other side, had 251 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. Looking at the wide receiver corps for the Bengals, Chad Johnson had 117 yards and a touchdown, leading the Bengals wide receiver corps, but a lot of other players did contribute as well. Antonio Bryant had 131 yards for Cleveland with 2 touchdowns. Dennis Northcutt had 87 yards, and Steve Hyden had 82 yards and 3 touchdowns. But the crazy part about this game is that Cleveland actually trailed this game by 14 at halftime, but came back and held the lead for most of the 4th quarter. Palmer led the Bengals on a long drive, capped off by a Rudy Johnson 70-yard touchdown run to go up 51-48. And with a chance to tie or take the lead, Holcomb threw a pick 6 to seal the game with a final score of 48-58, with the Browns losing by 10. But honestly, the game was a little bit closer than the final score would indicate. 106 points is still the highest post-merger total score ever. Honestly, the worst part about this is that it actually didn't end up mattering at all. It had little to no implications on the rest of these teams' seasons because both of these teams missed the playoffs and had completely underwhelming seasons. But at the very least, for this Week 12 game, they gave us a show. In 2015, the New York Giants played the New Orleans Saints in a game that was an unexpected classic, and realistically might be one of the most under-discussed regular season games of all time, and definitely in the last decade, because Eli Manning threw for 350 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 1 fumble, and Drew Brees threw for an NFL record 7 touchdowns, 505 yards with 2 interceptions. I actually did do a video about the passing touchdown single game leaders, and Brees is in that video, one of my first videos I ever did on this channel, so go check that out. I'll leave the link in the description. But the combined 13 passing touchdowns is actually still an NFL record, and there was not a single point scored in this game that was not an extra point or passing touchdown, which I mean is insane. The final point was a field goal, but other than that, single point and extra points only. The Giants wide receiver corps held up their end of the bargain for sure because OBJ had 130 yards and 3 touchdowns. Shane Vereen had 60 yards and 1 touchdown, and Dwayne Harris had 37 yards, 2 touchdowns. Ruben Randall had 55 yards as well, but he did not get in the end zone. The Saints wide receiver core also had a good day. Obviously, everybody had a good day if you're a receiver or a quarterback in this game because Ben Watson had 147 yards and a touchdown. Marquise Colston had 114 yards and a touchdown. Willie Snead had 70 yards and a touchdown. Brandon Cooks had 88 yards and 2 touchdowns. And CJ Spiller had 15 yards and 1 touchdown. A crazy part about this too is that Brandon Cooks is actually a part of 2 of the 4 highest scoring games in NFL history. And it's not really significant, but it is a fun fact. Manning and the Giants may have had a remarkable game, but this game ended in the most New York Giants way ever, as Marcus Murphy returned a kick with around 10 seconds left and the score tied at 49 all. But a fumble was picked up by Willie Snead after a return at the 50-yard line, and he was brought down by the Giants punter, but they called a face mask penalty on the punter, and the Saints got to kick a 50-yard field goal to win the game. And that may be hilarious because it's just such a New York Giants way to lose, but to end on a huge mistake like that did not end up mattering at all because both teams finished third in their divisions and missed the playoffs. But they ended up giving us one of, if not the greatest quarterback duel in NFL history, and I'll always appreciate this game for that reason. The game I'm about to discuss is probably the reason most people clicked on this video. I mean, the 2018 Chiefs versus the 2018 Rams was a moment in NFL history. Both teams were 9-1 coming into the game, and it was one of the most hyped up games ever. But it definitely lived up to the hype. And you know what's crazy? One of the most crazy fun facts in NFL history, honestly, is that this incredible game had a line for bettors that was a combined score of over 63.5 points when the final buzzer sounded. And the Chiefs and Rams had combined for 70 points by the end of the third quarter. And the over cashed if you did bet or you bet at that time. That is crazy to me because, I mean, that's such a high line and they still surpassed it by the end of the third quarter. Mahomes finished the game with over 500 total yards, 6 passing touchdowns, and 3 interceptions, while Goff had 413 yards through the air and 5 total touchdowns in the game, 4 passing and 1 rushing. Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, and Kareem Hunt all had over 100 yards in the game, with Hill having an insane 215 yards and 2 touchdowns. And it's crazy because he's still doing those same things to this very day. But the Rams had a much more balanced game with 6 receivers catching 3 or more passes compared to the Chiefs only having 4. This game was incredible to watch, and it was not only one of the best offensive showcases ever, but it was a game where both defenses came to play and had big plays all night. The Rams even sealed the win when Mahomes threw his 3rd interception to LaMarcus Joyner to ruin any chance of a Chiefs last-second comeback. The final score was 51-54. The LA Rams won, and the 105 total points was one shy of the post-merger record set in 2004 by the Browns and Bengals that I discussed earlier. These teams were actually a few plays away from meeting in the Super Bowl, but Dee Ford took away the chance of the Chiefs making it there, and the Rams did actually luck out with the brutal no call versus New Orleans in the NFC Championship game. So it's safe to say it just wasn't meant to be. But like I said, I think this is probably the greatest NFL game. At the very least, the greatest regular season game in NFL history. But yeah, that's actually all I have for this one. If you enjoyed this video and want more content like this, leave a like, comment, and subscribe because I'm going to try and drop bangers for the rest of 2023. So lock in with me and subscribe. I'm out of here though. Peace.